Okay, now we are going to redo the video from yesterday. I was very out of it, and well, anyways, it ended up being way too long, and I think I was rambling. The point of the matter is that this video is not about the technical side of things, like oh, like for instance, like what sound is, um, vibrations off of your eardrums caused by vibrations reverberating off of walls and all this kind of fucking shit. Forget all that. I'm telling you from years of experience what being a music producer is actually like. And some of the things to look out for, some of the tips and tricks and all that to look out for that a lot of people never speak on. Because they're quick to tell us, that, oh, compression means that, when a certain transient is above the threshold that you set, then it will squash the signal down and da 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 da. Who gives a shit? What that means for you, what compression means is either you're doing it to make something louder, you're using it to distort something, or I don't know, you're using it just to use it. You're using it to make things sound cleaner, crisper, whatever. So it can be used obviously as an audio engineering thing, but it can be used, like I said, in production, just as a creative tool, right? So I'll show you that really quickly. I gotta let Logic load up because I wasn't sure I was gonna do this section of it today like I did yesterday, but I just want to show you the difference really quick. And then we'll go ahead and cover EQ right quick too, because the rest of these things on this list have absolutely nothing to do with, I guess, the actual process. I'll get into that later. You'll understand in a minute. But these are the two things that I see on like every producer board for new producers especially. But this video, I mean, it's for anywhere from beginners to intermediate. And if you're advanced, maybe you can learn something too, because I'm talking about a lot of intangibles today. But I'll go ahead and show y'all this really quickly. So let us see. Let's just pick a random thing. Oh, let me bring this over here so y'all can see it too, actually. Duh. Let me move this out of the way for a minute. Okay. And then hop over to switch our windows here. Boom. Booyah. Alright, check it out. So what compression means is you want to make shit louder, or you want to amplify something that is in that signal, like, or possibly distort that signal. So let's go to our loops. I'm just gonna pull a random loop off of Apple Loops, just because this is free and accessible to pretty much anyone with Logic. Instrument. Let's just go to beats. I think this might have been the one we used yesterday. It doesn't really matter which one we used. I just think this one had like most instruments, or okay, yeah, this one. Okay, so I'm gonna loop this. Boom. And our beat. Okay. It's just decent or whatever. So, something you would, right now there's, it says there's an EQ on here, but there's nothing on here. All you need to know about EQ is there are, not all you need to know, but I mean, essentially, you would either use it to subtract an unwanted noise. For instance, in this range right here, 2K to 5K, 2.5K to 5K is usually like the shrill range. Humans are hardwired to hate that sound because that's where a baby's cry lies. So a baby's cry, or nails on a chalkboard, that kind of like, it makes you want to react, is right here in this range, 2.5 to 5K. You're getting on the higher range of things when you get into anything with K, which means kilohertz. So if you look on the screen, you'll see, okay, oh wait, it's not showing. Hold on 2 seconds. I thought I was gonna show both. I gotta switch between them. Mixer tracks. Not that one either. Okay, if you look on the screen, on the left side of this, we will see your low ends, meaning like your bass drums, anything that goes like doom, 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 like anything that has weight or heft to it, like it's hefty, you know what I mean? That's over here in this range. So usually on a drum track, especially since we're about to work on a drum track, this is a beat with multiple things besides drums, but this is why I picked this one. You would go ahead and increase 50 hertz, and it'll make a lifetime of difference just by doing that. If this were vocals, you would take this little end over here to the very, very far side and decrease like the 30K range, right? Because for the human vocals, it's going to be in this middle section. So you really don't need all of this extra noise because it's just causing more noise on your track. Okay, and this helps your engineer if you are not the one engineering as well. I do both, so that's why I'm telling you some of these things. All right, the long story short is that human hearing goes from this over here, 20 hertz, all the way over here to 20 kilohertz. At that 2.5 to 5K range is where there's like a lot of shrillness. So if you use a lot of bells in your music, you're gonna want to watch out for that area. Anywhere from 2 to 10K, you're gonna want to raise this up right here like this, and then take out parts of it, or take this one, it'll be better, right? So you see how right here you would do this and sweep across just to check for any frequencies that sound like that sounds terrible type thing. And the reason why you want to do that is because not only will it make your ears tired and then alter your production, but it will do the same for your listener. Your listener will be like, yo, what is that? Like, what is that sound? It's going to drive them crazy. Okay. So you want to increase here. You want to temporarily increase in the high range just to figure out what section to bring down and lower volume wise. And then, like I said, mid range is like voices or piano or trumpet, depending on how the trumpet sounds. So it's kind of warm is the best way to describe it. But it's not as hefty as like a bass drum that's like doom, doom. So I'll show y'all right now the difference. Okay, let's do this. And then we'll move on to the actual other stuff that real producers know. Okay, so this is our beat right here. So this is how it sounds by itself. Okay. And then you hear how it changed. For this beat in particular, let me just reset it to recall default. Okay. We go over here to 50. If we go over here to 50 and I raise the dB, you hear how that starts smacking a little bit harder? Like that shit smacks, bro. Okay, so we gonna come over here to a high range. You hear that? That right there. So at 6,000 kilohertz or 6K, 6,000 hertz, we have that really, really shrill sound coming off of that hi-hat. So this is what I mean. You would have subtractive EQ where you amplify the terrible sound and you wince a little bit and then you bring that shit down. All right, and it'll make your stuff sound better. All right, boom. So that's EQ done. Now, typically, some people put there's always this debate about whether you should put the compressor first or the EQ first. I always put the EQ first just because I'd rather take out the problem areas first than amplify it. But I understand that. I guess the other reasoning would be if you put the compressor first, you're amplifying all the bad shit, EQing it out, and then, yeah. I've seen some people do EQ, compressor, EQ. That way they're doing both. It's up to you, but I always put EQ first because I'd rather take out the problem areas first before I amplify them even more. All right, so right here, really quick, compressor. Let me bring this up on the screen for y'all. Yeah, better yet, let's just do our. There we go. Yesterday I had a lot of stuff on the screen, that's why I didn't do it that way. Okay. Here we go. All right, boom. So the compressor's on the screen, right? Same beat. It's the only thing we have on the screen. And I'm just gonna click a random drums. Let's just do a classic drums. Okay. So boom. And I'll even use not the LA2A. We'll use whatever one that it was just on. All right, boom. So I'll do it with and without. Close your eyes and listen to the difference. We'll leave the EQ on. Right. So those of you that heard it drastically decrease, which I think most people, even if they're not into music production heard, that's the difference of what a compressor can do. It either you're using it for, like I said, volume increase, or you're using it to glue the things together. So you might have things that kind of pour over. Like when we put the compressor on just now, you heard it become like tighter. Like the kick drum became like it just brought itself in more, instead of the harmonics all over the place. Oh, I forgot that I'm still upside down. Sorry, that's probably bothering some of you. Anyways, instead of the kick drum kind of pouring out all over the place, it's actually what's the word, together now. So yeah, a lot of, you're either using it for glue, distortion, like a particular sound, or you're using it to make things louder. And some of these compressors, like Logic has an emulator of all the classics. So like your LA2A, which is a big deal. The 1176, it has the DBX 160 on here. For some of you, none of this means anything. The red one is the Focusrite. The point of the matter is that sometimes you want just like that classic sound. Like I had an instructor tell me that when I was in audio engineering school, he said that the LA2A, like there's tracks, but then like that's a track. Like he uses it all the time on vocals. He says like you don't have a complete track without that sound. So there's a particular sound because of the tubes inside or whatever. Like I said, I'm not getting into the technical side of things today, but there's a particular sound that the LA2A, I mean that one and the 1176 give off. There are things like the Neve console from the 70s, which is very rare nowadays. At least, you know, like a lot of the people that used to be able to fix these things, like a tape machine, are not around, or the parts aren't made anymore. So you know, some people still go to tape. They use tape to cut their final record because it adds a warmth and a saturation to the sound. So the point of the matter is, you obviously heard the difference when I played it with the compressor or without. Sometimes you just want a particular compressor to give you a classic sound, and it has nothing to do with trying to make it louder necessarily. But when you go to radio, well, first when you master your song, usually they make it louder. And when you go to radio, radio extra compresses the signal. So basically you have two things coming together, creating this heat. Like you can, if you do this with your hands right now, you'll start to feel heat in between your hands. So that's where the warmth comes from, essentially. Like think of compression like that. Like you don't want everything bleeding all over the place. You don't want the transients going outside of what you set for your threshold. So just keep pushing together, and you'll have this warmth and this glue, yada yada yada. All right, boom, here we go. Now let's do this. There we go. Okay, no compressor, no EQ. And then if we have the compressor without EQ, you hear that harshness? We took that out. So with the basic EQ that I just did right in front of you, I moved two little things, the compressor I didn't move anything. I just used the preset that Logic had. We can see a vast difference off of this Apple loop, which is even better. Um, Apple use, Apple loops are totally usable. The longer you produce, the more you're gonna want like quality sounds in and out. So you might not want Apple loops, but I mean you can manipulate them so that they sound high quality. Not like they're low quality to begin with, but you'll find better sounds as you go, which is another thing we're about to get into right now. This right here. Oh, and then the last thing you can do with this is obviously we talked about distortion, right? So if right, I don't want to play that too long. On this one, I wouldn't do distortion like to that extreme, but what you do is you push your input gain higher, your input volume higher than your output volume, and it causes distortion. So sometimes that can be a really cool effect. Not really this one, but we'll put our input at 17 and turn the output down. So you hear that kind of crunchiness that came about all of a sudden. That's another thing you can use compressors for. Alright, boom. And then typically I have a custom bus. So a bus, either you want multiple things like a whole group of your drums, so like it wouldn't be in a loop like this. If you had individual snare track, an individual bass track, an individual hi-hats, whatever. If you wanted all your drums to have a similar sound without taking up more of your computer's power or your CPU, instead of taking up more CPU and more file space, you would just, push them all to a bus and apply it all there. Like apply the same plugins there instead of putting each different plugin on each different track and like sitting here trying to click and make sure that everything is in its exact space or having to copy and paste 1,000 times. Just bust it out, and anything that you send to this bus will now have that sound that you want. So you can use it for that. I use it a lot for CPU because Logic tends to have that overload processing error, which a lot of you have seen. That's part of it. Also, having Google Chrome open takes a lot of CPU, like a lot. I was trying to make sure it's not open right now. Yeah, it's not. All right, so anyways, you saw me. I hit bus, and I put send bus to aux 4. So your send will create an aux. Turn up the bus here on the sending channel, and on the receiving channel is where you would put the specific plugins you want. So boom, setting. I already have my own shit, so like templates and stuff. So this is my drum bus and how it would sound if we used my thing. So let me take that away. Right, so my shit, yeah, my drums is tight. My shit it sounds better. Now if I didn't like that super loud kick, you could just turn down the bus like this. Like turn down off the send channel, or you can actually turn down the physical bus. Like if I like that tightness but it's too loud, I'll turn down the bus like that, or I would just turn down the send so it doesn't give me that sound. Alright, so last thing, experimentation. So this is a thing I was gonna get into later, but you'll learn that sometimes you're going to be extremely unmotivated or even worse than that, you'll be extremely motivated but you can't produce shit. Like it just is not working out. You're forcing everything, which makes the music suffer because it's all vibrations, right? So if you think about the vibrations of your body, there was a experiment, this guy in Japan, I think Dr. Yokomoto, long story short, he took samples of water, put them in petri dishes. He talked shit to like three or four of them, and then the rest of the group, he had like 30 samples or something. But I think like at first he did like 3 or 6 He just talks shit to him, and then like the other 3 to 6, the other 5 he had or whatever, he did nothing but positive affirmations. He was very kind to the water, and it kind of sounds silly, but what he ended up doing was freezing them, and the crystallization or the snowflakes, quote unquote, that the ones from the positive side had were way more beautiful and like elaborate than like intricate, I mean, than the ones where he, was talking smack to him all day and making them feel bad about themselves and yada yada. So then when you think your body, I've seen anywhere from 60 to 90%, typically 70%. Your body's 70% water, right? So imagine when you say negative stuff to yourself, or like, I can't do this, or I'm trash, or this, that, and third, you keep talking smack to yourself. Imagine what is happening inside there now that you know about that experiment. Music is also a vibration. It's literally a vibration off of your eardrum sending a signal to your brain. And even if you couldn't hear, which matter of fact, they have a cool movie out now. It was like a drummer who was starting to go deaf, but he was playing with other deaf kids by drumming on the slide, on the metallic slide, so they could feel the vibration even though they couldn't hear the sound. But same thing, like if you ever had somebody walk into the room, like especially when you're doing studio sessions, you have somebody walk into the room and their energy is off, they're very negative. Not only does it impact you, or it might impact you, but it impacts the sound, it impacts the overall music. You can just hear it, you can tell that there was a shift in the room. And that whole thing, I mean, that really goes into quantum physics and all that. So we're not going to go into all that today, but just, be cognizant of that, because same thing, like just because you can record doesn't mean you need to record everybody. You know what I mean? I'm going to get into that because there's some horror stories and shit like that. But the point of the matter is that why I even brought up vibrations and everything like that is that sometimes you're going to want to create, but when you start forcing it, it's going to make it sound terrible. Because it's all vibrations. The whole universe is vibration. So same thing with, there's going to be slumps and times that you just got to get all the trash stuff out. Like, just keep creating, you know what I mean? Like, there's no such thing as writer's block. The only thing you can do for writer's block is to keep writing. Like, that's the only way you're going to get past it. If you start getting ahead and say, oh, I can't do this and then you're not going to be able to do it. So same thing with writer's block, same thing with music production. The only way to flush out, the blockage is to continue to do it. So boom. So this is the next part, is experimentation. And then we'll get off of Logic and I'll tell y'all the rest of the shit. But let's say we had the same track that we just did. Y'all heard it. It was like this, right? That's with the custom. Okay, so boom. So we took the basic Apple loop like this, that, and then this. Okay, we've all heard it enough times. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because, sometimes just don't be afraid to experiment. Like, try different shit. Especially if you are stuck, maybe it's because you keep doing the same things over and over again and you're just bored. Like the way Timbaland and all of them get a signature sound. Timbaland has a signature sound. Nerd or Pharrell has a signature sound. Swiss Beach has a signature sound. Same thing with Just Blaze and whoever else. The reason why is because they are not afraid to experiment. Furthermore, if you only listen to hip hop, if you're a hip hop producer and you only listen to hip hop, you're only gonna sound like what was before you. Timbaland, he says he listens to a lot of world music, a lot of Brazilian music, that kind of thing, because the way they structure their songs, the instrumentation they use, the way that they play music is way different than in Western society. It's way different than in America, way different than in the UK. So take from other genres or other places that you wouldn't expect and roll that into your own production. For instance, like there's a bird chirping outside right now. that's something else he would do. He was like, man, you should be able to create a beat pretty much off of anything. So a bird chirping might inspire him. I've seen one video where like a dude put his sneakers in the dryer and he was able to like remix Missy Elliott's song. 1 Minute Man was because of the way that the sneakers was squeaking. So look for music in your day-to-day life. But something else you could do, like I said, is come on here with these amp. You just add a plugin. There's an amp designer. There's a bass amp designer and an amp designer on Logic. So you would just pull that up. I already had one up there, but like, let's just work with the one that we were already using. Right. So we did the EQ, we did our compressor, yada yada. Now, well, this one is above this, so let me turn that one off. We'll go this. Right. So here we have this. And let's do like a distorted sound, right? Just any one. So that changes it drastically. I know it sounds like shit right now. I don't like this one. Okay, so boom, we just went to like a 70s kind of synth vibe or 80s synth vibe. Just off Okay, boom. You see that? Like, and this was not something I planned. I literally just doing this on the fly with y'all. But you would go through the different kind of amps or the different kind of whatever and just experiment. Like, this still sounds kind of cool, even though it's not our original shit, right? So what we could do is just copy this, duplicate this, turn it off on one of them, right? So now the amp is giving it kind of like a spacey dubstep kind of reverb. Not dubstep, but like dub reggae kind of reverb type of thing to it. And you can always turn down the amp, the presence of the amp. Just kind of add a little something, a little bit of body to the, a little bit of harmonics to your drums and shit like that. All right, so boom, there we go. Experimentation, EQ, and compression all done in less than 30 minutes. All right, so that's the first part of it all. Now, for the more, I guess, intangible shit, I really thought I could do this in less than an hour, but it's just not meant to be because I gotta show y'all the shit. So, whatever, it doesn't matter. All right, so. Oh yeah, we already talked about what's it called? So experimentation. Oh right. Oh, and then that's another thing. The beat maker versus producer. Real producers know this. A beat maker is like we would have kept working on that. Like we had our drums and we started adding elements, instrumentals or beats. If we would have finished that beat, put it on BeatStars or whatever kind of website, Airbit or whoever, and sold it, that would be the end of our influence over that track. So we would do the beat, shop the beat, and when somebody bought it, that would be the extent of our job. That makes you a beat maker. A producer is actually in the studio with the artist, guiding the ending part of the song. telling, the engineer what he wants to hear, telling people in the other room. I'm not even gonna save that last one. Let's just fucking exit. Okay. Telling the engineer exactly what he wants to hear, changing different things, or like, hey, can you make that more saturated, or like I just did with the compression and the amp and everything like that. Like some people say, well, what does DJ Khaled do? And it's like, he's the one that got Bryson Tiller and Rihanna in the same room. He's a producer. Quincy Jones is a producer. You know, they have direct influence over the actual ending part of that. What's the word of that track, right? So this ain't really knocking, I guess, beat makers, but at the same time, it's like a lot of people keep saying, "Oh, I'm a producer, but they've never worked with anybody in the studio," and that is the major difference. Because working with an artist in the studio is a tough thing. It can be a tough thing. Like I said, hold on one second. Okay, I was just locked out of my account for like a week because of copyright shit. So I don't want to have that shit in the background again. Oh, right, back to the point. Sorry, it's like 9 a.m. So I'm like slightly out of it, but this was like important to do for some reason. So, anyways, beat maker versus producer. That's the main difference. A producer actually works in the studio with an artist or with themselves. And I'm not saying you have to go pay a studio. You can have a home studio set up with the right kind of treatment and the right, things to record in, like a proper booth and that kind of thing. Which is what most people do nowadays anyway. But that is significantly different than just making an instrumental and sending it, shopping it out and that kind of thing. So the reason why I say all this is I'm grateful somebody had told me this, but I also had to learn the hard way, which is just because you can record doesn't mean you need to record everybody, right? Because people were like, oh, you're a producer? Like all of a sudden everybody, is an artist. And you'll find very quickly, that they're just on a different level than you. And I mean, that's kudos to you in a sense. Like, okay, for instance, there's a time where you would actually guide the artist or help the artist, and you'll be able to kind of feel that out or see like, okay, some people are more determined than others, or they actually are serious about their craft. Then you'll come around these motherfuckers that they say, oh, I'm a singer, I'm a rapper, I'm an artist, I do this, I do that, and you get them in the studio and they have no clue what they're doing. And to me, it's like, yo, like, don't waste my time. Like, I understand, if it's your first time, then just tell me it's your first time, you know what I'm saying? And I'll help you go through things. But to kind of pretend to be someone, or to pretend like, you do this, like, you really do this. And then, we get in the studio and all of a sudden I tell you to do ad libs and you don't know what the fuck ad libs are. I've had that happen. Another guy, it was like, yo, like, I stayed at homie's house for like 3 days. Like, I took my gas money, drove down to Atlanta. At the time, I was dating somebody down there anyway, but it wasn't even about seeing her. It was like, I met him at a songwriters meetup. I'm like, yo, this is going to be super dope. So, hop in the car, go down to Atlanta. I'm staying at homie's crib for like 3 days, which I'm grateful for because I ain't got to pay for a hotel out of pocket. I could have, but it was like, all right. I thought it was going to be dope vibes. Let's create, yada, yada. And it was like, at first, okay, he's freestyling. Like, he's a singer, R&B singer, but he also just freestyles, right? So it's like, okay, it's dope. He's freestyling some different ideas, da-da-da. Finally, we kind of get on to one. So I'm like, okay, so I hit record. From that point on, we're like, from the recording, I'm like, okay, let's take out, he can't remember the lyrics for shit. So out of the recording, we take out different little elements and we start performing a song together, which is kind of like how Ryan Tedder also teaches to do like the gibberish method. If you ever watch Songland on NBC, or if you take his class, you'll see the gibberish method, which is basically like you have a melody and then you're like, okay, and you just kind of vibe to the melody and go, and then you kind of just flow with the melody, not really speaking words or any kind of tangible words just yet. You just ride with it, you just vibe with it, and then eventually, you know, you're gonna hit on some words, like you'll say something and like, oh, I think I can actually build on the concept of that. So then you write the song based upon that type thing. So the reason why I bring all this up, homie was freestyling, he couldn't remember shit. I hit record, and we're like, okay. So he says something, and I'm like, yo, like that's dope, and he's like, yeah. So he says at least like 3 different things over the course of it, where we're like, okay, we can build on this. Long story short, he you know, 14 hours later, we done worked on the same song for 14 hours. Like, from the time I get up to the time I go to sleep, he wants to record. Like, I can't even get up and like just chill for a minute, 10 minutes to get my thoughts together. He's like, the minute I make a noise, he's like, okay, you ready? Like, right? Which I already at that time, I was not a morning person. Not saying I am now, but it is 9 a.m. and I'm up. But the point is, like, I felt scared to even make a noise, because I didn't want him to come be like, all right, let's go. The reason why I say that is because when he would get into the booth, this is a Isovox, which is like, it's like $1,000 investment. Make sure to invest in your career, but it legit ass, like, airplane noise, anything going overhead, it blocks that shit out. So it's like a professional, you can't really see it from this angle, but a professionally treated studio, essentially, right? Like a booth in a studio. So the point in the reason why I say all that is because the minute that he would get in here, all of a sudden he would get like nervous, I guess because he knew we were recording. So there were certain times where I was having to like hit record and pretend I wasn't recording just so that he would feel comfortable. So it's like, okay, you say that you're an artist, but you can only freestyle. It was to the point where like 14 hours later, we still changing lyrics. And I'm like, yo, just write the shit down. Like, just write it down. There was even a point where I said, look, I'm here. You know what I mean? Like, there's no pressure. There's no rush. Go work on the song. I emailed him the beat by itself. Go work on the song and come back. He kept wanting to force it. Kept wanting to do it. So 14 hours into the damn thing, we still have jack shit. This dude leaves his house. Like, he had just moved to this apartment. But he leaves the house with his cousin. Leaves me in his house. Like, if I was a different type of person. Anyways, he leaves the house and tells me he's going to be right back. He leaves with his cousin. Goes across the street, I guess, to his sister's house, who lived in the same apartment complex. And comes back with some type of fucking trash I never heard in my life. And he's sitting here talking about, like, la, 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 la. Like, doing all these la, la, las in the middle of a song. And it makes no sense. Like, it has no context, no structure. It sounds terrible, right? So I'm just like done at this point. I'm just sitting at my computer like, okay, like, let's get this done. You know what I mean? Like, get it over with. So I hit record and he does this la 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 shit, and then he just finishes, and I guess he's embarrassed, and I'm like, are you good? Like, he's like, no, I'm fine. So he storms off, and at that point I just pack all my shit in my car and fucking leave. And he's like, you're leaving? And I'm like, yeah, like, you said you were done. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna sit here and waste my time for the next 14 hours working on a song that, you know, you just can't get together. I don't know, man. It was just a wild, crazy experience. And then that same dude had the audacity to hit me back up a few months ago. And so I said, okay, you know, a big part of me, like 60-70%, was like, don't even answer this dude. But I did anyway. I was like, let me just hear what he has to say. So he hits me up, and he's like, and I was like, do you need something? And he's like, oh, I was thinking we could, you know, record music again. And I'm like, are you working on something? You know what I'm saying? So this is something that you learn as a producer. Like, a lot of these cats will say, oh, yeah, I'm this and I'm that and da-da-da-da-da. But then they can't actually record a song. They can just do freestyles for their family and friends in the living room type shit. So I'm like, okay, you know, I was like, are you working on something? He's like, yeah. So, and even over text, I can tell he's lying. So I'm like, okay, send me a demo to, you know, this address, to this email address. Never heard from him again. So the reason why I say that is like, don't get yourself trapped in these situations. Working with amateurs for one, I mean, like I said, everybody starts somewhere, and if you have the time and patience to try to get an artist through there, then do it. But there's got to be a level of honesty from them as well, to say that they don't really do this, so that you know what you're getting yourself into. All right. So, anyways, damn, we already halfway through the list. This is the next big thing. I think I'm just gonna do a part 2 right quick. Yeah. All right, stay tuned. I'm gonna exit this one and do a part 2. Hold on. Finish.